the home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking.
Perfect. Head. I mean, Lincoln Riley has sailed under perfect skies up until now. He's been able to hide behind it because of the fact he does do great with offense. There's no arguing that. But when it boils down to it, we watched it every time. Aside from the Georgia game, they got the crap kicked out of them in those freaking playoff games. The crap kicked out of them. It wasn't close. And it was because you knew they couldn't play defense. He wasn't recruiting it well. They never were getting anywhere close to a 5. And they didn't get a 5-star close to coming this season to USC either. And you're not gonna. And you've got the entirety of California is supposed to be your oyster if you're Lincoln Riley at USC. Yeah. And yet you can't get a defense that can help you compete. Toughness is what matters when you get to those big games. Let's go! Welcome back to the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, and if you love college football, you are definitely in the right place. So before you forget, smash that red subscriber button, like our videos, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Folks, this is just one segment that I'm clipping out of the more than hour and 30 minutes of a conversation that I had on the show with the one and only outlaw of college football, Mr. Jesse Paul Clark. We talked about a wide range of topics, everything from Skittle shitting knuckleheadedness out at the University of Southern California to big-headedness in the form of that ever-inflating ego of Mike Gundy that continues to run off football players that were formerly in his program at Oklahoma State, and even the basketball greatness of players like Larry Bird and Michael Jordan in comparison to LeBron James and the new guard of the NBA. Yeah, this was indeed a wide-ranging talk between two outspoken college football content creators that hold very little back when it comes to their opinion about the names, faces, and personalities of those that make up that sport we love so dear. So sit back and enjoy this segment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast with our special guest, the outlaw of college football, and then you can thank me later.
Now, Lincoln Riley, for all his crap that I don't like, he has actually scored a few points in his games, but the problem is they can't stop nobody. Right. I mean, as you know, because you're an Oklahoma fan, LSU beat them 63-28. They got their 28 points, but they give up 63. Alabama beat them 45-34. Mm-hmm. And even back with Georgia, the game.
Well, they were down 28-0 before freaking first quarter was over with.
Right.
You know what I mean? That wasn't even that game was never close.
Yeah, Saban just took his foot off the gas.
Right.
Whereas, you know, teams like LSU and Georgia, sometimes they don't take their foot off the gas. But even back when Oklahoma played Georgia, y'all had that game won. That should have been the year that y'all played Alabama for the national championship. And probably
if there was going to be a year that they were going to win it, it would have been that year because they did have the big boys along the defensive line.
Exactly. They could have beat Alabama.
Sure.
And he's up 31-14, and Georgia gets that little field goal right before halftime because that stupid kick that he done.
Squib kick. And I was at the Rose Bowl that night, man.
History. What that game end up? 52-51 or something, or 53-52 or something like that?
Well, yeah. Well, it went to overtime, and they screwed up they had that fumble, and then right away. And the thing was that Baker had been sick all week, And so for whatever reason, he takes his foot off of the gas. And once you let somebody change the momentum, then it's over. And as well as Baker played, I mean, he was definitely the best player in college football that year, in my mind. And they had they were great on offense. There was no reason why they should have lost. And even defensively, as I said, Jake Fromm and those guys hadn't done anything up until that point. And you left that little opening. Sony Michel goes right through it, and the next thing you know, you're in a shootout. And as we know, look at all these times. What was that? The fifth or sixth time that they've had a 14-point lead. A Lincoln Riley team's had a 14-point or more lead and lost in a postseason game or in something, whether it be a conference title or in the playoff or whatever. He's just not good with leads.
Yeah, I saw a stat where it said that Lincoln Riley's blew like 6 or 7, 14 or more point leads in the last 2 or 3 years, which is more than any other FBC or FBS coach out there. So,
right.
And with Garrett Riley, he's supposed to be this next coming that's supposed to be even better than Lincoln, and then he couldn't even put up but 7 points in the national championship game. And then his defense, his defense gives up 65 points.
Oh.
Man, it looked like that wasn't even an ass whooping, man. That was like an undressing of an FCS opponent, like a homecoming opponent from the FCS or something.
Right. And I saw on there where you were talking about how Kent State actually played them closer, you know, and I mean, obviously different kind of game and different kind of, eyes on it or whatever. But no matter what, if you can't find a way to get up for this team, for this game and put on some kind of show, I mean, look, I'm not a big fan of the Big Ten right now. I think that it's, aside from Michigan and Ohio State, it's pretty much trash. But the one thing that you could understand, I mean, even with Ohio State being as bad as they were against Michigan, they found a way to come in and put in a game plan that almost did win against Georgia. Now, and Georgia didn't have their best game in that one, but at least, I mean, and I've always said that I always call Ryan Day Lincoln Light, but because I think they're about the same dude. I really do. But that being said, he came up with a game plan that gave him an opportunity to win. How are you, if you're Sonny Dykes and Lincoln's little brother Garrett, how do you not figure that out? It just doesn't make sense.
Georgia's probably going to get their 65 points anyway, but you could at least made it look respectable and maybe put up 28, 35 points, which they couldn't do.
I think that the lights were just way too bright for TCU. I think that that's clear. Myself,
there was a lot of questionable play calling in that Michigan game too. Not saying that cost Michigan the game, but there was a lot of stuff that broke TCU's way. It was a perfect storm for them
all year long too. All
Michigan
year long
should have beat them. Kansas State should have beat them twice.
Baylor Light should have got them. Okie Light should have got them too. They had them up by 17, and early in the second quarter they had them up. They were up 17 on them.
You see teams like that all the time that, like you say, they're not used to being there, and they barely squeak by. And then when the Cinderella slipper falls off, it falls off big time.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, and I guess that was the question I have for you is, being a Big 12 guy, and I know how I feel about the conference. I grew up watching this conference, being an Oklahoma fan my whole life. I'm glad to see OU and even Texas go into the SEC and getting into the league to where, you have to build your team a certain way to win it. And Oklahoma fans are not going to be okay with middle of the road. So that, they're going to definitely, that's why Venables is there. That being said, once these guys are gone, if TCU is your flag bearer or even Oklahoma State, what does that mean for the conference future? To me, I'm worried about it. I feel like this is definitely going to a Big 2 type of deal, and you're going to see the rest of them kind of become the minor leagues.
Well, the Big 12 that are, what do y'all call them, the hateful eight or something that y'all left behind that's, pissed off. They've been pumping their chest out this year because Oklahoma and Texas have sort of slid a little bit and pounding their chest and saying, see, we don't need them. We're in 2 big bowl games without them. But you see what y'all done when y'all got on that big stage. The 2 flag bearers for the SEC, Georgia and Alabama, beat the 2 flag bearers for the Big 12 by a combined score
100 points.
110 to 27.
Mm-hmm.
110-27, man. Kansas State's supposed to be the Big 12 champs now. They beat TCU and should have beat them twice. And I'm not going to sit here and debate on who should have been in. Alabama screwed themselves, but if
They lost by a
TCU
grand total of 2 points in their two games.
if TCU loses a game, you're supposed to drop some when you lose. That's the way it's always been. Not only did they not drop, they stayed in the same spot. So if you're not going to put Alabama in, at least put TCU number 4. And that way you get that shit game out of the way in the first round. And then
I would have loved to have seen Michigan and Ohio State play again to go to the championship game.
You tell me that Ohio State and Michigan wouldn't have been an extravaganza for ratings? That's one of the most watched rivalries of all time. And I think Ohio State would have beat them in a rematch. And then you would have had that classic in the national championship game.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the semifinal round of it was fun to watch. You know, you had 2 competitive games. Again, I agree with you about Michigan. I think that Harbaugh spit the bit on that. I think that he choked it away, to be honest with you. And I've always been a fan of his as far as how he coached, but he freaking choked it away. You're down there on the goal line twice and you don't get in. You don't get no points out of it even. And then they're bitching about non-targeting calls and bullshit. No. You had your chances. You should have just won the damn game.
That targeting call was at the end of the game, and it would have moved them to the 50-yard line. You mean tell me that you think you're going to get a Hail Mary at that point?
Okay. It was. They were lucky to get that. They were lucky to fit that ball into where they did at that point. You know? Get the fuck out of here. It was a joke.
Yeah, Jim's living off those 2 wins over Ohio State right now. Because, honestly, the Big Ten, outside of Ohio State, all they want to do is win the Big Ten. Back in the day, that's all they cared about was going to the Rose Bowl. They had a little Rose Bowl tie-in with the Pac-12 where nobody else could play against them. They took their little ball and went home back in 1946. Mm-hmm. And they made everybody else have to tie in with bowls for a long time. And now we finally got away from all that crap, and now we're going to get a real playoff. I wasn't really sold on the 12-team playoff until this year.
I agree.
Yeah, my team got screwed, but there was a lot of other teams that got screwed too. Tennessee beat Alabama. So
even with the backup quarterback, they were talking about because of a backup quarterback that they almost didn't give him the Orange Bowl. And I'm like, dude, that backup is as good as freaking their first guy, you know?
And if you're not going to put Alabama in because you want to punish Alabama because they get in every year and you got Bama fatigue, well, then put Tennessee in because Tennessee's better than TCU.
Sure they were. And as much as, I mean, look, with the one loss, I didn't have a problem necessarily with putting them in there, except for the fact that you just knew that they weren't. I mean, had it not been for USC blowing it against Utah twice, yeah. But I mean, in the second one, for sure, that was the only thing that allowed TCU to get in. And do not tell me that USC would have done anything more. They couldn't even beat Tulane. So don't tell me that they would have done anything more than what TCU did. That just goes to show you that, because I didn't think Ohio State deserved to go in either. They didn't play anybody all year. When they did, they lost. And then
that's why when that 12-team playoff,
I think that had there been a 12-team playoff, it guaranteed it's 2 SEC teams playing for the title. No doubt about it.
And I'm not saying this because I'm an Alabama fan, but I truly believe that the only teams that could have beat Georgia were Alabama and maybe Ohio State. Just like with Caleb Williams. If USC doesn't have Caleb Williams, they lose about 5 games this year.
Easy.
If Alabama doesn't have Bryce Young this year, we probably lose about 3 or 4 games. We probably lose that Texas game for sure.
Definitely. And probably the A&M. Well, he didn't play in the A&M game, but of course, that was Texas A&M. I love, little brothers. These little brothers are something, aren't they? So, yeah, and I agree with you as far as – and the other thing that SC got away with, and we can kind of segue into that a little bit. To me, here's the deal. You've heard this from USC fans all year long is, Oklahoma, all you fans are just pissed off about Lincoln this and that and blah, 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 blah. Well, first off, he was shady as hell. The way that he left in the middle of the night, I'm not going to take the LSU job after they lose Bedlam. And by the way, I've felt like this and will continue to say that game was thrown. He ran the same fucking play 7 to 8 times in a row and still almost couldn't keep Caleb Williams from winning it. I mean, they were this close.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that game was thrown. Then they ride home together, not on the bus. They ride home together in a vehicle, just a regular truck. And so they could talk about what's going to happen moving forward. Caleb Williams was not on the bus with his teammates. He was in the Suburban with Lincoln. That's the whole deal.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that, man. You
didn't know that? Yeah, man, that happened. That's there. That's well known. There's going to be some grill on that. That's what happened. So they're riding home, and they set up the whole thing of, you can wait to do the portal deal until after the bowl game and all that kind of stuff. And then he played it out well. I'll give Caleb Williams that. He played it out very well, smart about the way he did it. And I don't even necessarily blame him for leaving. I get it. If you think that Lincoln's going to be good for your career, obviously he wins the Heisman Trophy this year. Mm-hmm. That was smart on his part. But the way it was just shady. And then Lincoln doesn't even hang around to tell his team that he's leaving, right? Yeah. He makes sure that the guys he wanted to come with him knew about it. The guys that he wanted to come with him knew that he was leaving. Nobody else. He left. Go ahead.
I thought Bob Stoops made him go address the team or something. That's what I'd heard. I don't know.
I've heard that as well, but everything that I've heard really was that Bob Stoops went to address the team, and they were freaked the hell out because he hadn't spoken to them. So
a lot of people say, well, that's just hearsay. You don't know for sure that he was, working for USC while he was employed by Oklahoma. But we do know that because one of his staffers was caught recruiting for USC while he was still employed for Oklahoma. He was caught doing it. The NCAA caught him doing that. Yep. So the dude was already recruiting for USC before he left. And, man, that's just beyond shady, man.
Yeah, and listen, what about the Pitt coach? I mean, he was like, look, they were talking to the receiver, Jordan Addison. They were talking to his ass before they ever played their bowl game.
Right. There's nothing wrong with going after players in the transfer portal. That's okay.
He wasn't in the portal yet.
But you are not allowed to lure them to the portal.
That's right. Well, all of this NIL and transfer portal stuff, there are no real rules. The NCAA has no more teeth. They haven't in a long time.
No.
When you've got Jimbo can sit down there and stand on a table and tell you that he didn't spend $30 million when we know he did, and we know that he used it as an enticement too. The fact that they made that rule is a joke to me. If you didn't make that rule, if you said, okay, use it as an enticement, it's pay for play, you might as well just admit it. Then you could say, all right, so now we can put a cap on it. Now we can say, we can at least know what the numbers are so that there is some level of control. Because right now, there is none. There's none. Right. These guys could up and leave. JT Daniels this is going to be his 4th team in 4 years at Rice.